So how can a GABAergic synapse be both excitatory and inhibitory? Well, to understand that, we have to go down to a chemical level of description. GABA acts on ion channels, and when those ion channels are open, they pass chloride ions, but they can also pass bicarbonate ions. Both these types of ions are negatively charged. But the concentration of chloride ions is higher outside the membrane. So when the channel opens, negative ion flow is inward and reduces the chance of the neuron firing, in other words, inhibiting the neuron. But the concentration of bicarbonate ions is higher inside the neuron. These ions are also negative, so the outward flow when the channels open will excite the neuron. The channel is opened by being bonded by GABA. But which ions pass through the open channel depends on the local membrane potential. If the membrane is already depolarized, for example by an excitatory postsynaptic potential, the channel allows chloride ions to pass, which opposes the depolarization. But if the local membrane is at resting potential, the channel passes bicarbonate ions, and they result in a depolarization. So if a GABA input arrives when there hasn't been a recent excitatory input, it'll slightly depolarize the membrane. Then, if an incoming excitatory input arrives a bit later, it'll act on an already slightly depolarized membrane, so its effect will be greater. So, stepping back a little, if there's lots of V1 neurons producing outputs, but some of those neurons have their outputs modulated, the spikes from just those neurons will be bunched within time slots centered on the modulation peak. So those neurons will have a much enhanced effect on their targets in V2. Effectively, those V1 neurons have been selected for release to V2. So in the earlier example, if the V1 neurons getting their inputs from within a visual boundary on the retina have their outputs modulated, the effect is that only information from the area within the boundary, in other words the image of just that visual object, will be processed deeper into the cortex, which is what we mean by visual attention.